All right. Thanks for tuning to another episode of the Why Influence podcast. Today we got an awesome guest. His name is Dick, and he's got a influencer agency where he helps influencers get paid sponsors. So he's acting as that middleman between companies that want to get their mission and content out there, and the influencers who have those communities. And he's constantly like having these conversations, negotiating with people. So and you've got your own podcast yourself. You're a creator yourself. You mentioned in the meetup prior to this that even Nickelodeon had reached out to you about your grandmother shooting some hoops, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
that's right.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming here on the show today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Jeremy. And I'm super, super excited. I've actually, when we first met, it was because I found your podcast and I watched a couple of episodes, including the one where your wife interviewed you. And I was like, man, this is really good content. And I reached out to you, and I'm super excited. So let's rock.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for reaching out. That was pretty cool that you were like, hey, watch this episode, and now here we
Yeah,
are.
yeah. I think originally it was just because I wanted to attend your meetup, and I was like, I just want to meet your community, and then it evolved from there. So super pumped.
Yeah, yeah. You came to the meetup, and then people asked questions, and you like engaged, and you just had a couple moments where you shared, and it was just value bomb after value bomb. So I was like, man, I got to get you back to be a speaker in the community, and then it evolved to being also on the podcast here.
Awesome. Well, let's rock. What questions you got?
All right. Well, first of all, I want to hear what it is that you do from your side. So can you tell us a little bit about like an elevator pitch about your
Yeah.
personal sharing, and then your business?
Yeah. So continue listening if you are an influencer who is just getting started and maybe wants to learn more about how to get your first branding deal or your first sponsorship deal and start monetizing your content creation. Keep listening if B, you are a company or maybe a younger company who quite hasn't had the experience reaching out to influencers and how to manage those relationships and begin those campaigns and how to measure the return on your investment. Or C, if you're just super curious about how the influencer marketing realm works and you want to know from an agency's perspective, because we represent influencers as their agent, and we also represent companies as our clients. So we broker deals both ways. So that's primarily the context that I'm hoping to provide the value for today.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll
Yeah,
be linking everything in the description and in the show notes for this, so anyone can go to your LinkedIn or go check out your content.
perfect.
So first of all, I want to ask, um, you know, have you ever impacted anyone as a result of sharing? So like, is there a story that comes to mind that as a result of doing what it is that you do and sharing that, have you had anybody that said like, hey, this made an impact on me?
Yeah. From the content creator side, so Online Growth Systems is the company, and I can talk about that next. But from Dick Polipnick, from my personal brand, the Dick Polipnick Show, um, probably my favorite story of impacting someone's life directly is, we get the emails, about once a week. I'm a smaller influencer personally, but we get those emails once a week saying, hey, I just watched this video and you changed my business model. My business plan has improved, et cetera, et cetera. And we've even had some companies that have won business competitions. They've signed investors for their, seed round because of a video that they saw. And they reached out to me and said, hey, you don't know who I am, but I've been following your stuff for a couple of years. I just want to let you know that you helped me take my business from napkin idea to a funded startup, and we've got $500,000 in the bank from an investor, right? So we've got those stories, but my personal favorite is actually one that was extremely personal and internal. So our company, Online Growth Systems, also produces my podcast. I'm my own client, or I'm my own company's client, and Joy was she was our content manager for several of our clients, including the Dick Polipnick Show, my podcast. So she would take the podcast after it was edited, after our creative team went through the editing process and the improvement process. And then she would do the SEO side, and she would optimize it for views, do the content distribution. She wrote some of our show notes. So if you go to the website, you can still see some of her legacy content from a couple years ago and read it. And she helped take our blog from, like, this is maybe back in 2016 or something. She took our blog from like 2,000 monthly readers to 8,000 monthly readers, like that, because we put her through our training program, at our company, and helped onboard her, and she got it. Obviously we've got like the training program, but she's very naturally gifted at it, and that's why we hired her, right? And after doing that, post-production piece and the distribution piece for our content, or for my content, you have to watch the content to know what to do the SEO for, right? What's the episode about? And she got so inspired by the content that she was working with that she, picked up her own YouTube channel, started doing it as a side hustle. Eventually it became so lucrative that she quit her job at our company and became a full-time YouTuber. And that's my all-time favorite story. And obviously we were bummed to see her go from the agency perspective, but as a content creator, that was like so validating, and just feels amazing to know that you helped catapult them to success. And she's still YouTubing today, and she went back to school because that was another one of her dreams she pursued, and she's doing great.
That's amazing. And it's not like you started your podcast to be like, I hope one day that someone who's editing my podcast is going to quit to go do full-time influencer kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but that's what happened, and I couldn't be more happy about it. So
awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start with some advice here. So you work a lot with sponsorships and things like that. So what's your biggest advice to a new influencer? So someone that maybe hasn't started yet or is just starting, like what's your biggest advice for them?
My biggest gold nugget for influencers who either are just getting started or maybe want to get that first deal, or maybe it's their second or third, right? But they're just starting to build that momentum up, is do a placeholder campaign. When I say placeholder campaign, it's a real campaign that you do for a company, but you're not getting paid for it. And they might not even know you're doing it to benefit them. So for example, if I really like, I really like Star Wars. I've got this little trinket here on my desk that I just use for fun. If I'm in a Zoom meeting and I'm just playing around with the lightsaber, right? I can take this podcast and I can say, hey, I just, you don't have to say this podcast is sponsored by, but you can say, hey, I just want to really mention to my audience that I got this really cool Star Wars lightsaber at store XYZ the other day. And man, it is just, my anxiety has gone down, because when I'm in these intense business meetings, off camera, I'm just kind of playing around with this little battery powered lightsaber. And it's really made a positive impact on my mental health during this pandemic with all the Zoom calls going on, because it just adds a little bit of that fun that I'm missing from, the good old office days when, I was sitting next to my peers. And then you say something like that, maybe 6 episodes in a row. And then you say, and if anybody's interested in, maybe purchasing this, I put a link in my description below where you can click and you can buy this product on Amazon, or you can buy this product on their Shopify store, starwarstrinket.com. And I'm not affiliated in any way. I'm not getting any commission. It's just a really cool product that I really like. So if you're interested in checking it out, the link's in the description. That's step one. Find something that you already like, that you already use, is 100% authentic. I literally just picked this up. You don't get much more authentic than spontaneous things on my desk, right? And so that's step one. Step two is that link that you put in your description, whether you're a blog writer, you put that at the end of the article, you're a YouTuber, you put that in the description below, you're an influencer on Twitter, you put that in your bio, right? What you do is you use Bitly. So bit.ly is the URL. And then through that software, it's free of charge. You can shorten URLs from like Amazon.com/Star Wars trinket /red lightsaber /Darth Vader episode 4.com. And it's super, super long, right? That's not going to fit in a tweet. Instead, what you do is you put it into Bitly. It shortens it up. You can customize it to bit.ly. So Bitly /red lightsaber or Star Wars trinket. And then, so number one, it shortens it. Number two, you can customize it so it's branded. And number three, this is the most important, is it's trackable. Its analytics are built into the tool. So every time somebody clicks that Bitly link, Bitly adds a tally, and it can track, and if you do the paid version, you can get more advanced features for analytics. But even the free version is great for getting started because it shows you graphs of like at what timeline, how many people went and clicked the site or clicked the link to go to the site. And then you can use those analytics as leverage. So I could reach out to said Star Wars trinket company and say, hey, I have been promoting your Darth Vader lightsaber on the last 6 episodes of my podcast. I just got, I'm just getting started in, building my momentum and building my audience, but I just want to show you some of the traffic that I've sent your way, totally for free. So I've done 6 episodes. Here are the links to the episodes. Here's a screenshot of my Bitly account where you can see when the traffic that I sent your website, and you can see I sent 400 people to your website in the last 6 days. I'd be super curious if you could look up in your Google Analytics and see how many sales you got from my traffic, because they can do that. If a company has half a brain about their website, they have Google Analytics integrated, and they can actually track where their traffic is coming from, and they can actually see, oh, we got 400 visitors from this YouTube channel, or from this Bitly link, and from those 400 people who visited our website, 100 of those people added it to cart, and 50 people actually went through the checkout process, entered their credit card information, created an account on our Shopify store, and purchased it. And if these are $10 a pop at $50 at 50 people, that's $500 in sales. They just made $500 that week from you promoting for free their stuff. And they say, when you include that screenshot and they can actually see the traffic that you sent them, your response rate is going to be much greater than, hey, I like your stuff. Can you pay me to promote it? It's kind of like give first, then ask. You can say, hey, I've already sent you $500 in sales via these 400 people going to your site. I would love to have a discussion about, if you're interested in me continuing sending you this traffic, I'd love to have a conversation with you about possibly sponsoring my YouTube channel or my podcast or my blog or my Instagram, etc. Is that helpful?
Very helpful. Yeah, that's an awesome strategy, because you are pitching something you're authentic about. You're sort of taking control of your situation. Like, there's no one to blame if you if you don't have a sponsor. There's no one to blame really except yourself if you're not even attempting a strategy like this, if you know about it, because you can pick something to pitch. You can create the link. You can create multiple pieces of content pushing that link, and then getting the analytics, and then following up with the company and trying to get in front of the right person. And that just puts it completely in your hands as a new and early edge creator.
Yeah, you're eliminating, or you're decreasing the luck factor, right? Because let's be real, that is a very influential metric in the make it or not, right? So whether it's the YouTube gods and the YouTube algorithm, put your video on the trending page, obviously that's where luck comes to play in a little bit. There's, like, in my case, Nickelodeon Studios discovered my video and reached out to me. That was luck. It's not like I didn't reach out to Nickelodeon in that particular case. But when you do a strategy like that, you are you're letting luck influence you less, and kind of taking control over getting momentum, right? And you're putting it more in your ball court, which I think anytime you can do that is a no-brainer. Why would you not?
Yeah. So. And in the worst case, if you attempt it and you don't get the click-throughs, we'll just keep creating content and then do it again, and then keep trying it until you see enough results that you feel ready to pitch it out.
Exactly. And it's helpful for influencers to actually know, the reason you're not getting sponsorship deals is because you're not driving any traffic, and you're not worth the investment. So a lot of times influencers have to put themselves in the shoes of the business, because the business thinks of this as an investment. It's a marketing expense. And when they invest into marketing, they expect to get a return. So every dollar that they spend, they want to get $5 back in sales. Or every marketing campaign that they promote, they expect to get X amount of booked appointments or demos, or people signing up for their free trial. That's called as a KPI, a key performance indicator, and that is how they measure results of marketing, which influencers are a form of marketing. So one thing that is also helpful is the influencer might do that. Let's say I did that with the Star Wars example, and I go, holy shit, nobody clicked that link. Nobody. I had zero traffic. First, I'd test it myself to make sure it's working, right? Let's say then I saw one person visited it and it works, but that one person was me testing it. Then the problem lies not with the problem doesn't lie with the company identifying if you're a good investment. It's they've identified you're not a good investment, or you maybe you just quite aren't there yet. And that's where you can start to fine tune your influencer business, because if you're trying to make this your full-time gig and make this your career, it's a business. You are a small business owner, and you are the product. And if you find out that you get tons of views, but nobody's engaging with you to the point where they're willing to click on your links, or they're willing to support your Patreon or visit your website or follow you on Twitter, then that engagement is poor quality, right? A good example of that is when you jump on a trend, like for a 24-hour trend. And we're guilty of this too. When net neutrality was a big thing back in like 2017, we did a real quick marketing campaign about educating people about net neutrality to pick up on some of that huge spike in traffic. Yeah, we got a ton of views for those videos, but then none of them subscribed. None of them signed up for our newsletter. Nobody clicked on our links to hopefully become a customer of our company. It was purely hollow traffic, so that's kind of the difference of, you might have great traffic, but the engagement is low. So the investment just isn't justifiable.
Awesome. Well, that's great advice, because it puts the power into the creator's hands, and it helps assess the situation, and you can tweak from there. So that's great advice.
Yeah, you bet.
Marshall said the dream. So thanks for tuning in, Marshall. All right, so let's talk about seasoned influencers now, because you work with a lot of larger influencers through your business. Like what some of like if you don't mind sharing, like what's some of your secret sauce? Like what's something that like a larger influencer may not be doing that they could be doing, that sort of sets what you can do apart from someone else?
What large influencers are doing that smaller ones aren't, or
like what kind of advice would you give to a larger influencer? Like what's a common thing that you see that they're doing maybe wrong or could improve on?
That's a great question. Make sure that assuming they have an agent, make sure that the agent is worth their fees. So I think a lot of agencies and agents, that represent you, the fees are large. Transparently, sometimes they'll take up to 70% cut for a deal, right? We don't take that much, but and I used the example earlier in the meetup of it's definitely worth working with an agent, because you could either have 100% of a grape or 50% of a watermelon. It's a win-win to have half of a watermelon, right? Because the agents or the company, your agency representative can bring you bigger deals. They can justify higher fees. They can help you with the business side of it. They can pitch you better and add more dollar signs behind your bank account, frankly, but if you like to have 100% creative, control over the business side, in addition to the creative, that's where you have 100%, but you might have smaller deals then, fewer deals in your pipe flow. So that's 100% of the grape, right? But if I were to give advice to larger influencers who are tuning in, I would say make sure that they're actually worth it, and making sure that they're actually driving you the results that you need, because sometimes an agency will only get X amount of deals per month, and they're going to feed them to their most profitable influencers every single month. So if you're getting left in the dust of, let's say you're on a roster of 100 influencers at said agency, and they primarily, it's a pandemic, so I get it. And let's say that they only have enough business to feed the top 10 influencers. That might be a situation where you need to go off and be independent and represent yourself, or you need to find another agency who is hungry for influencers. They're hungry for that side of their business, and partner with them, because maybe then you would be their largest influencer, and then you are the number one person on there that gets served the deals. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. We get a lot of influencers that reach out to us because we are known for, we don't just manage the deals that come their influencers' way. We actually actively pursue and seek out deals for our influencers. So we're managing relationships on both sides. Somebody DMs them, and they just forward it to us, and they say, "Hey, yeah, here's another deal. Let me know how it goes if you guys sign a contract, and I'll just make the content." But we also find the companies, make a deal, present it to our influencer, and say, "Hey, we found this company that wants to partner with you. Here's what they're willing to pay you for X, Y, and Z. Do you want to pursue this campaign?" And they say, "Absolutely." So that's my biggest piece of advice: is find an agent that works for you,
Right.
and isn't just a one way. So
Yeah, and I think that's a different perspective than a lot of people that have larger audiences may be missing, because a lot of times they try to make it out on their own. And I know I've talked to a lot of larger influencers that maybe are bringing in income in certain ways, but not through sponsorships, and
mm-hmm.
it might be because maybe they don't have the bandwidth for it. So just having that as a thought that goes through your head to be like, hey, maybe an agency as an option is even something else to consider too.
Totally. And a lot of influencers, the reason they're influencers is because they're really good at their craft, like really good. And they've just found a way to make it a living by providing entertainment or education or whatever it is the case for an audience. So if you're a woodworker, like I came, TikTok is notorious for this, that like, oh, you get into the woodworking TikTok or the lawn care TikTok. And somehow like the TikTok algorithm just like knew that I liked woodworking, and it started showing me woodworking videos. And then essentially I'm like just hours deep into like these weird TikToks. And I'm like, how are these people making a living on like there's gotta be just such a small niche. But you forget that there's 8 billion people in the world, and out of those 8 billion people, there's going to be a teeny fraction of them are into woodworking that there's an entire, you can have an entire business, and you can live your entire career off of making fun videos of how, like, little tips and tricks for how to use a bandsaw better, because out of 8 billion people, a fraction of a percent is still 10 million people, so
even in the meetup that you spoke at earlier today, one of the guys in there has a wood turning YouTube channel with 35,000 subscribers, and
exactly
wood turning. It's a niche within the wood,
right, yeah, very specific, but it works. So
yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for the advice. So let's jump into your story now a little bit.
Yeah.
So when did you start sharing in a bigger way? Like, let's go to the beginning here. Like, what did that look like? When was that? When did you like start putting your voice out there?
Yeah. I started in January of 2016. I think I made my first YouTube video, and it was about Twitter. Because, okay, well, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I was in college. And I heard Guy Kawasaki speak. He used to be the chief evangelist for Apple way back in the day, and now he's a shareholder and the chief evangelist for Canva. If people are familiar with the Canva, it's like a very user-friendly version of Photoshop. And so I heard Guy Kawasaki speak my first week of college. I got a scholarship for entrepreneurship at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. And part of that program, part of getting that scholarship, is you got to come in like a week early before everybody else was on campus and go through this like entrepreneurial boot camp type thing. Excuse me. And they had Guy Kawasaki come speak as the keynote for the end of that, program. And he was talking about thought leadership and how entrepreneurs are, leading, they're literally, their job description is being leaders of companies and starting companies and building businesses that employ and create jobs and create health, wealth, love, happiness, right? And it's like what keeps things going, right? And that was just so inspiring to me. And I was obviously already super into entrepreneurship. I had a business, my first legitimate business, when I was like 14 years old, that we can dive into more. But he inspired me to the point where I thought, I want to start practicing thought leadership, so that way, as I scale my businesses, scale my companies, I'm a better leader for them. So I started on Twitter, because I felt like that was just something that I wanted to. I just picked Twitter, and I started tweeting content but I was not a thought leader myself at that point. Like I didn't have the authority or the experience to like do some quote,
Right.
from Dick Polipnick. I had no experience or nothing worthy quoting. So what I did is I started pulling quotes from other people, creating these graphics using Canva, and I would put them on my Twitter, and then I would tag the people that they were quotes from, and I would just make these really beautiful graphics. So number one, it got me good practice with graphic design. Number two, it started helping me with my networking, because sometimes those influencers that I would tag and quote would actually reply, and then we'd start a conversation, and that's how I started building my network out. And some of that's just pure luck of them like happening to be in a good mood when some random college kid tags him in a tweet back in the day. But that's kind of how I got started, and I eventually built it up to like 9,000 followers, and I made a YouTube video in January 2016 where I was like, at that point, I felt like I had a little bit of authority of like, how did I literally opened up my Twitter account like right after that keynote for the first time. You know what I mean? So how did I go from opening a Twitter account and then like 6 months later having 9,000 followers, which was way more than any of the friends that I had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how I did it, because I was like feeling so inspired. Like, and then I said, well, I did this to my channel. I did this. And that was my first YouTube video. And then this is another, I'm totally aware that, luck plays a piece into it, but the YouTube algorithm put it in its favor, and it was like the number one result for like several keywords related to that topic for years. And it had got pretty good traffic, and that's what kind of established my first base of subscribers for YouTube way back in the day. So that's the origin story.
All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about that here. So you intentionally started Twitter because you knew that you wanted to grow your thought leadership so that one day you could be a better leader. So that's sort of what sparked you to start your journey of sharing. And you did it through a way that was pretty easy to start sharing, because you took quotes from other people, you created artwork, and you shared it on Twitter, tagged people. So it wasn't necessarily putting your voice out there, specifically. So it's like easing your way into that and getting some experience for what helps through the process. And then you started the YouTube video talking about how you did that. Like, what did that video look like? Were you talking to the camera? Were you on camera?
Yeah, I think it was called Photo Booth. Was that the old program, like way back in the day, like on old Macs, that like you could like do, like, that was like the first thing that had like filters. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
So I would open up Photo Booth, and I dragged it to the bottom left of my screen, and then I think I had the browser open on like the other half of the screen where I had my Twitter, and then I just used like QuickTime to screen record it or something, whatever the program was back then. And that's because I had zero editing experience. So I was like, how do I get a camera like in the corner of the video while also doing a screen? And I'm like, well, you just do a recording and then put it in a screen share. You know what I mean? But I didn't know that. So I literally had one window showing my camera feed, and then the other with the browser. And then I just recorded the screen like that. And
Nice.
so really duct tape bootstrapped it. So.
Yeah. So you started out right, like, putting yourself out there, that's a big leap, gone from posting quotes of other people to now you're on video and sharing something that's sort of vulnerable to an accomplishment that you made. So what was going through your head when you posted that video? Were you nervous? Did you worry about how people might perceive it? Like, what was going through your head there?
I did it all within like 48 hours because holy crap, did I do that in 4 months? Yeah. Okay. So let's say August, I started Twitter. I decided to drop out by November. I just, the entrepreneurial itch was just too strong for me. In school just wasn't my thing. So I decided to drop out. I stayed till the end of the semester, obviously, but, and so I stayed through the end of that semester, that first semester. So I only went to one semester of college, dropped out. And then that January, I made that video. So I guess
Oh
I
wow.
did even faster than 6 months, I thought. So I, part of that was like, I kind of went through that, very stereotypical, like I want to be inspired and find myself, my true self, and whatever. And which is, I'm making fun of myself, but like, it was awesome. Great experience. And I decided to go on a backpacking trip through Central America when I was, how old would I have been, like 18, 19, something like that. And then I wanted to kind of set up, like kind of experiment with like a little bit of an automated business, online business, while I was backpacking, just to see if I could get momentum and see what happened. So like within 48 hours of like my plane leaving, where I wasn't going to have Wi-Fi for 6 months, right? This is, you'll see that I just like jump in the deep end like a ton. That's like a very repetitive theme. I like had no context of like hostels and like what there's Wi-Fi at coffee shops. Like I was like, I'm going to be in the jungle with a machete. You know what I mean? So I was like expecting like zero Wi-Fi. And so I didn't bring any laptops or nothing. So I wrote a mini ebook talking about how I did the Twitter thing. And then I made that video, and then I built like a little bit of a marketing funnel around it. And those were like the 3 assets. And then I did that within like 24 hours. And I was literally like was like submitting the book on Amazon on the Kindle store, like at 3 a.m. when I had to get up at 5 a.m. to go to my flight. So I got like 2 hours of sleep that night. And then I was on a backpacking trip for a couple of months without any internet. And then when I came back, that YouTube video had like a ton of views. I had a ton of people who downloaded the book. And so there was that luck piece. And yeah, I kind of rambled there for a little bit, but kind of fun stories. So
Yeah, no, that's cool. But I backtracking a little bit, like, so you're someone that jumps into the deep end. What was going through your head when you created that first video and posted it? Did you have, like you never really put your video out there before that, based on how you're talking. So, like, what was going through your head when you pushed like submit or upload to YouTube? Like, any barriers that you had to overcome through that process?
yeah, well, tons of barriers. I say I jump in the deep end, but like I do a ton of due diligence, like a ton. So even though I did the production in 48 hours, I was researching it for months beforehand of like, what does an online business look like? What does influencer marketing look like? What does thought leadership look like? And that's like, I was learning it through my own practice of, building my Twitter account. Right. So I was actively practicing and immediately implementing the things that I was learning. And that was super helpful. So I don't want to underestimate the due diligence and the sweat equity that it takes. I don't want people to think, oh, this, Dick just got super, super lucky with the algorithm or whatever. It was a shit ton of effort. And like, I optimized the crap out of that stuff. And I looked up like word for word, the script I was going to write. And like, I put a ton of effort into it beforehand and due diligence. So that way, when I did make my MVP, that first video, that first, splash page, that it had a ton of research behind it. It had a ton of trial and error, practicing it before I publicly released it, kind of stuff. So I was
So
confident.
When you recorded that video, did you record it multiple times? Like, did you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I would hope that everybody would, everybody kind of looks at that, their first take of their first video, and a couple of years later, you just cringe and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought that was decent, or like,
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Even
That's
now
something
I
we
look
hear.
back.
Yeah, that's something we hear a lot about. Like, I'll ask for advice on overcoming barriers, and oftentimes, especially YouTubers can be like, "Well, you can record content, but it doesn't mean you have to post it." So, like,
Yeah.
that's a perfect example. Is you recorded it, researched it, recorded it, researched it, tweaked
Mm-hmm.
it, made those
Mm-hmm.
mistakes, and then released something you were comfortable with after
Yeah.
all that.
I've got some stories of, oh my God, there was I don't want to say their name, but I had a guest come to be on my show and I forgot to click record.
I just looked up when you said that. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. You're just making sure we're live streaming, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like a big name, like B-list celebrity. You know what I mean? And it was one of those things that like the stars aligned for them to like, for me to like actually get in touch with them, and then like they were in a great mood and were like, yeah, I'll be on your show. And I was like, holy shit, my life is about to change just from having this person's name right on my show. And I forgot to click the record button. And I even now I'm like still kicking myself because it was one of those deals where it was like they were too big of a name to like reach back out and be like, hey, so I forgot to click record. Would you be okay with coming back and doing it again? You know what I mean? Like, no way, you know? So I just really learn from your mistakes. And now I'm like, you know, I've got that PTSD of like always making sure that it's recording and I have a backup of the backup of the backup. You know what I mean? And you learn from your mistakes. So.
Yeah. I talked to Dave Jackson. I don't know if you know him. He's in the Podcasters Hall of Fame. He's a big podcaster, and
awesome.
He says that you're not a real podcaster unless you've gone through one of those where you forgot to hit the record button.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like a what do you call it? Initiation, or a sign of, you know, you've been through the fire. You know.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that story. It's amazing. Even Marshall said a crazy story. So thanks for that, Marshall.
Yeah. Thanks, Marshall.
All right. So, you know, what made you want to get that like thought leadership? Like why did you give yourself permission to start that Twitter and then go eventually to the YouTube shortly after? Like, you know, what was going through your head? Like, how did you give yourself permission to do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I give a lot of credit to my mentors growing up. Okay. So one of my favorite stories is a lot of times when I'm a guest on a podcast, they ask, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? And my answer to that is the best piece of advice I was ever given was from my dad, who I asked him, I was building up my company when I was in high school. I had a property maintenance business that I started with just myself, a single gas can and a push lawnmower and this little red trailer that I'd pull physically because I didn't have a driver's license because I was 14, right? And I'd go door to door around town pulling a trailer with this equipment, and built that business to the point where I acquired a competitor when I was 17 years old. And by the time I graduated high school, I had 21 people employed working for me. So it was a good business, right? And did that, totally funded it myself, you know, with just like my, I don't know, your birthday money that your grandma gives you for like, so I had like $2,000 in my bank or something, you know what I mean? So, and that's how I got started. Right. And then, throughout that journey of building that business in high school, I asked my dad about an HR question because I was like, I got like 6 people working for me at this point, and I'm facing problems I've never faced before at this scale. And how do I manage those team members? And he looked at me and he said, Dick, you employ more people than I have, than I employ. I do not know the answer to the question you're asking. You need to ask people who have been where you want to go. And that was the best piece of advice I've ever been given. Is his piece of advice was telling me, ask from people who have been where you want to go. And so I credit my dad for pointing me that direction. Totally. And it caused this domino effect of, okay, so if I'm asking a question about how do I manage these 6 employees for mowing lawns and trimming bushes and doing landscaping, I went and I talked to a landscaping business owner who had 20 employees. And I said, how do you manage it? And he said, oh, just use this spreadsheet. And that was like, blew my mind. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, it all makes sense, you know? So that, and then, you know, as you find other problems, you seek out those people. And I made a habit when I was a kid or growing up in high school that eventually I started doing that so often. And I was like getting such a great return on investment for my time that I would buy these guys lunch. And I can't remember who said it, but somebody famous, was it? Maybe it was Warren Buffett or Robert Kiyosaki, one of those guys, somebody like that said, poor people should buy rich people lunch as often as possible. And to read between the lines, it's because like the value that you're getting from just simply having a conversation from somebody who's years ahead of where you want to be is worth the, you know, even I remember being like 15 and like meeting up with these millionaires, asking them questions about business. And I'd pay for like $100 lunch, which to me at the time was like, oh my God, this is like 2 weeks worth of work for me. You know what I mean? Like, but like those were the best dollars that I ever spent. And I still, to this day, every dollar I can spend on a rich guy's meal gets returned to me through what I learned during that conversation 100-fold. And I totally went like 3 different rabbit holes, but what was your original question?
No, you're good, because those rabbit holes were given tons of value, and I couldn't agree more on that. I mean, I think that we've got all kinds of influencers who are listening to this and part of the community. And
Yeah.
one thing that I think podcasting gives is the opportunities for those conversations. That it's much easier to talk to people that you want to talk to when you say, hey, you want to be a guest on my podcast, instead of like, hey, can I have a phone call, or even potentially like, can I buy you lunch? And so podcasting is great for being able to have those doors open, those conversations, specifically
Totally.
as a form of influence.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's a great point. In addition to, because a lot of the people, I made the habit of trying to interview somebody like that once a week via lunch. And over time, as I started getting into, you go from Twitter to YouTube to podcast, whatever. And I started building up my own brand and having my own content, my own thought leadership. I still leverage other people's expertise because they've done things and have experienced things that I have not yet, or maybe we never will. Right. So in addition to the lunches, you're totally right. Podcasting is not just a way for you to build a business as an influencer, but it's also a great way to get the attention and have conversations with people that you would otherwise would be inaccessible to you. So sometimes if there's somebody I want to have a conversation with, I'm a small business owner, I've got a small media company, and I say, hey, can I buy you lunch? They're like, dude, like they won't even respond. They're going to have an audit, their secretary is going to, the gatekeeper is going to say, who are you? You know what I mean? Like, are you,
Yeah.
are you from Target, and are you bringing us $1 billion deal or not? And no, it's okay. Like, stop wasting our time. But when you reach out and instead of asking them for a meal, you say, hey, I've got a podcast with X amount of listeners. I'd love to interview you. Then they're willing to talk. Right. So it's a great alternative of getting those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's similar to like what I'm doing with this. Like even before starting my podcast, I had a YouTuber who with over 1 million subscribers who was willing to be a guest. And this is someone like that was on a panel at a conference, and I just walked up to him and asked him, and he's like, sure. And that door would have never, I couldn't have be like, hey, can I have a follow-up phone call with you to talk? Or like, can
to
I
ask your
food?
advice? Yeah.
Yeah. So like, the podcast definitely opened doors for that. And it's something I'm trying to grow at. Like I'm trying to be more authentic and, thought leadership. And that's a big reason for me too. As an entrepreneur, like I've started, built and sold a business. I started a business. I've grown like 200,000 followers for one of them right now. And like I'm seeing that in the future, I want to be able to be a face of a brand and be willing to stand on stages and talk about what it is that this business is. And I knew I couldn't do that without self-developing. So this
Definitely.
podcast is big self-development for me.
Totally. Yeah. That's awesome.
So thinking back to who you were when you posted that first YouTube video to who you are today, now that you've done those YouTube videos, you've done podcasting, all that, like, how would you say you've changed as like a person, like, whether it's self-development related or whatever, how do you think that you have changed from then to today?
I have gained a lot more patience, and that's something I still don't have that as a quality, but it's something I'm working on, right? And when I first started out, I wanted like results like yesterday, and I wanted traction yesterday, and I wanted momentum now. And I would get frustrated when a video that I put a lot of my heart and soul and time into would get 2 views because the YouTube algorithm just didn't favor it, right? And then some basketball video with my grandma gets good views, and then a licensing deal with Nickelodeon. You know what I mean? Like, really? Like, what about the videos that I'm putting like thousands of hours into, and my heart and soul into the content, and then like a little video of my grandma blows up. Like, really? So one thing how I've changed as a person is my perspective has changed to a lot more patient of an approach and playing for the long term and playing the long game, because I'm, as a young person, you think like, and I totally need to walk this line very, very delicately, because I'm a huge advocate for like following your dreams and pursuing the life you want to live. But I'm also a realist in the sense that, like, if you're 4'2", the odds, you know what I mean, and the odds of you being a professional NBA player are very, 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 very low, right? So, like, yeah, but I want to be an NBA player and I want to, slam dunk. And it's like, well, you're 4'2", so the odds of that happening, like, you can still do it. It's still possible, but it's you are going to be one in that 8 billion. For some reason, you must have a huge jump, right? So you have to be realistic about fate, luck, and
Yeah.
biology, and you might not have the build for it, or in a lot of cases you might not. Maybe you were. You get the idea. So it's finding that balance between, yes, we should follow our dreams, but you also have to be practical about the situations you're born into. For example, one of the reasons I had to get more patient is I was diagnosed with kidney failure at age 19, and it was like this really bad ordeal. I almost died a couple of times. It was like very sudden in the
Sorry to
sense
hear
of
that.
like, yeah, no, we're good now, but thanks. But as a 19-year-old who is, had tubes sticking out of, vessels in your neck, I had to go to a machine to get my blood cleaned 3 times a week. And it was me and a bunch of 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds, you know, and just that, putting that in perspective of like, holy shit, you know, life is so finite. So there is that sense of urgency and rush, because life is very delicate and life could be short, much more than you expect. But then it also gives that sense of patience and like being in the moment and being present and enjoying where you're at in the journey. And as cliche as it sounds, the reason it's cliche, it's because it's true, is you have to value the journey, not so much live for the destination. And
Yeah.
that's, if I were to say, that's the biggest thing that's changed, is my patience.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, good for you. So I didn't start out the podcast asking this, but I've been requested a lot, and so the past good maybe dozen or so episodes I've been asking it. But from just like a high level and whatever you're comfortable with sharing, do you mind sharing like your income sources as an influencer? I know you got a business
Mm-hmm.
sort of tied into it, but just like income sources as an influencer, maybe as for yourself, and then if you want to add extra things for maybe what you've seen, because you do interact with a lot of influencers, as
Mm-hmm.
like other income sources that you've seen that have worked, that'd be
Yeah.
great to hear.
Yeah. So high level, myself personally, uh, vast majority of my income comes from my company, Online Growth Systems, which is we're a what we call full stack media and marketing company. So we do everything from software development. We're building apps for iOS, Android, um, web. You know what I mean? We're doing marketing campaigns for huge e-commerce and SaaS brands and retail brands, and you name it. So that's the majority of my income is from Online Growth Systems, doing that marketing, software development, video production stuff. And then there's a small fraction of my income which does come from my personal brand as an influencer. And then out of that breakdown, a chunk of it is from licensing deals and recurring stuff like that. So whenever Nickelodeon uses one of our clips that they've got a license for, we get a royalty fee, or I get a royalty fee. We also monetize some of our content in the sense of, we write a blog post and it's a tool that we absolutely recommend for our clients, or I use a lot, in my personal brand. I'll include an affiliate link at the end of the blog article and say, hey, full disclosure, I'm an affiliate of this product. So if you purchase it, I get a percentage, but I wouldn't be recommending it if I didn't use it myself. And so a good chunk of, I would actually say the most of my influencer income comes from affiliate deals like that, because I we'll reach out to a company and say, hey, I love your product. Like the example I gave earlier. Hey, I love your product. I've been sending you a ton of traffic. This actually happened to me. I totally forgot that. I actually took my own advice. Wow. I forgot.
Nice.
This is so many years ago though, but I had a product that I really liked, and not only did I use it, but I force all of my employees to learn it when they get onboarded. So when they first join our company, they have to learn the tool because it's just so great that like you have to do it. In fact, this is so serendipitous. Joy, the person that worked for me and then left to go start her own YouTube channel, one of the tools that she used to help her grow our channel and continue to grow hers after, she did it full time for herself, was this tool and this product. And so I was promoting it a lot internally in our team. Our team loved it. It fueled our growth. It fueled our clients' growth. It fueled Joy's growth. And I was recommending it on our blog to our readers. And it got so much traffic. It was the number 2 search result for that keyword. And number 1 was the product itself. So it went their product, us talking about it. Right. And then they reached out to us and they said, hey, we got a ton of traffic from you guys and we're making a lot of money from your blogs that you're writing about us. We would love to hook you up with an affiliate agreement. And so every traffic you send to us, you get a cut of it. And we're like, sure, it's already written. We'll just swap out the URLs to the one that, gives us credit for it. And so we did that and that worked great. So hopefully people who are listening can learn from that. So that's to this day, that is a large portion of my influencer income is from that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then,
well, specifically on that, if you don't mind sharing, if you want to maybe mention the tool, and you can send me the link to the blog page after, and I'll put it in the description for this.
Sure. Yeah. So if they go to onlinegrowthsystems.com/recommended, I think recommended is the URL. In there, you can see some of our affiliate deals like I'm talking about. And the one particularly from that, well, gosh, just for non-disclosure reasons, I don't know if I'm allowed to, and I don't remember off the top of my head because it was so many years ago.
No worries.
But I for sure can say who it is because I do it in the article, but I don't know if I want to say the backstory of why. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good. I fully understand that and respect it.
Yeah.
Completely. Cool. So as far as incomes go, then for people that you've seen, because you do negotiate on behalf of other people. So
yes.
I think you're exposed to a lot. Is there anything else that you think maybe people should consider when doing their influencer business?
That's a great question. So in complete honesty, I would not normally be an influencer that Online Growth Systems would represent because I'm personally too small for our agency. But guess what? One of the perks of being a shareholder is you get to force it, right? So I get much better representation than the scale that I'm currently at justifies. But so for our influencers that we represent, that a majority of their income comes from campaigns that either we are working with our clients on. So like, let's say an e-commerce brand says, hey, we want to do a huge push for Black Friday. And we want to do majority of that advertising through digital mediums. So instead of TV and radio and billboards, we want to do it mostly on social media. Great. Then we look at, do advertisements make sense? Does an email campaign make sense? Does the thought leadership, maybe you make your own videos, maybe you write your own blogs. Does that make sense? And then as we whittle it down, in the case where influencer marketing makes the most sense for them from a return on investment standpoint, right? Every dollar they spend, they want to get 4 back. Well, in this particular marketing case, we think influencers are your best bang for your buck. When it gets to that, when it gets whittled down to that is the solution. We look at then what's their product, who is their target customer, and then where the business's target customer is the same as an influencer's fan base and audience. When those two are the same, that's when we align them and we contact, first we figure out our client's budget. Let's say they've got X amount of dollars to spend per month. We say, okay, we're going to spend this much on Twitter, this much on Instagram. Let's reach out to our Instagram influencers that have that audience alignment with their customer base. And then we'll say, hey, we've got this much budget. We think that we can do let's say 8 stories throughout these 2 weeks, on your Instagram stories. We want to do 6 Instagram reels, and we want to do a post once a week on your feed, whether it's a video or a picture. And then we want you to save all of those 8 stories into a highlight on your Instagram profile. And that's what the contract looks like. And then here's what compensation would be like. So in addition to those deliverables, we integrate with several softwares since we represent them to pull in their analytics. So that way the influencers, in most cases with us, they just want to do the creative. They just want to have fun and like make the content and do the fun stuff. They don't want to like read through the contracts and
Right.
screenshot the analytics and create a PDF report and tell them what the return on investment was. Like, that's just not what they're interested in. They want to do comedy. They want to, cook food, whatever it is that they're doing. Right. So that's where we come in, and that's majority of our influencers that we represent. It's through a campaign like I just described, where the exchange is content and delivering to their audience in exchange for financial compensation. So
Awesome.
that's a majority of where their income comes from.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. All right, so before I open the floor and tell people or have you share like how you want people to engage with you and follow up with you, knowing that we have a lot of people who are maybe trying to overcome barriers to start sharing, or people that are already sharing that want to level up, do you have any last words for our listeners here today?
Good question. Biggest takeaway, golden nugget, if you're looking for a nugget for a takeaway, is just get started. And like I said earlier, jump in the deep end, because I can only speak from experience. And I can say that from my experience, that's the way to do it, unless you're born into the Kardashian family, where you don't need to jump in the deep end because you were born with a camera in your face and you're going to be famous no matter what. You know what I mean? Most of us that's not the case, right? So you have to work to gain your clout. You have to work to build that influence and build your audience and your fan base. And how you do that, and I'm kind of echoing what I said earlier in the meetup from before, is start making content and put it out there for free. And if you're only doing it for financial reasons, don't do it. You should do it because you love it. You should do it because you enjoy it. And then if it's lucrative, that's just a perk that you get to do it full time. You know what I mean? If you want to be an influencer, it should be something that you're willing to do evenings and weekends in your free time because you love it and it's a hobby, right? All you got to do is just throw a camera in front of you, or you got to just write about your process. If you like wood turning, just record yourself wood turning, right? You know what I mean? And then, so that would be my biggest piece of advice, is just get started. Everybody has that fear of entry, that barrier to entry, like you're talking about, where they think they have to have a $5,000, Sony camera or a Canon camera. They think they have to have the chops with Final Cut Pro. And that's just not true. You can use a webcam that's built into your Mac. And you can use free tools like Anchor for your podcast, and you can use YouTube for video. And there's so many free resources out there, and technology has decreased that barrier to entry. Back in the 50s, you had to be somebody. Perfect example is music. Back in the day, and I think this is actually the pinned tweet on my Twitter, but back in the day, you only knew like a dozen famous singers, right? Like you knew Frank Sinatra, and the only reason you knew Frank Sinatra is because he knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy who he was born into the right family or whatever. He had that top 1% voice on the planet, and he was able to ink a deal with company so and so and get distribution, and that's why there was like Frank Sinatra is the guy, right? And then, but now you've got Spotify. And it's like democratized and like opened the floodgates to anybody can make music. Versus before, you had to be Frank Sinatra to make music, because you need a professional studio. You need the distribution. You need a record label to distribute your music. Now, anybody with an internet connection and a smart home device can access your music without a record label, without an inked deal, without a recording studio. You can buy a $100 mic on Amazon, or even just use the one that's built into your computer. And the barrier to entry has been lowered by technology. And I think that should be something that is encouraging for people who are thinking about getting started, or who might be sitting on that fence and trying to decide. So,
Yes. Well, so you hear that, you should just get started. I mean, if you think about how the world was 50 years ago and how big the barrier
Mhm.
was to get started, it's significantly dropped now. And really just use what you got, get started, and you can evolve from there. Great
Mhm.
advice.
Yeah, you bet.
So, how can someone just like send you a private message and say thank you, or how do you prefer maybe people engage with you? That's who's listening to the show here today.
Great question. Reach out to me on any of my social media. Since I'm a marketer, I have to be active on all of them. And, since I've got that influencer a part of my life as well, I also try to be active on all those platforms. As far as like engaging with me, they can go to my website, onlinegrowthsystems.com. And there you can see links to all of my social media and the thought leadership pieces like our podcast, YouTube channel, blog, whatever. And then there's also the business side of it. So if you're a company that's listening and you want to work on influencer marketing, or if you're an influencer and you're large enough where you want to be represented in deals, that you can reach out to me that as well. But that's probably like the one-stop shop for resources. If you want to send me a private DM, best platform is um, probably LinkedIn, and make sure that you include a message because otherwise I will decline it. I do
Yeah.
not accept blind requests of people I don't know. So put that in the note when you're sending the request. So yeah,
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to link all that in the description and in the show notes for this episode, so it's easy for someone can just scroll down and go to that and send you a message.
perfect.
So if you're listening today and you got some value, definitely shoot Dick a message and just tell him thank you and tell him maybe what you learned today. And it's awesome hearing feedback. So just make sure you send something his way. That'd be great. Um,
Awesome.
uh, we had a last minute question come in here from Marshall. Do you think your YouTube profile picture matters? So he's wondering if the profile picture matters.
Well, Marshall, I'm looking at yours right now, and I like it. So if you're concerned about yours, looks good, man. Um, but I would say it does matter, but like barely. You know what I mean? I would say it's more. It would matter if you had a bad one, right? So if you had a bad one of like, let's say a rubber ducky, and you're trying to be a business thought leader, then it's negatively hurting it. Then yes, it does influence your thing. Otherwise, if you have a decent photo, there's no like that. That is not what you should be spending your time on optimizing. You should be optimizing your keywords, your SEO, the quality of your editing, the quality of your entertainment factor. Those are much better return on investment for your time. But I would say it would matter if it's bad. Does that make sense, Jeremy? Did I answer that in a
Yeah,
way that
yeah,
makes sense?
yeah. I
Okay.
think so. All right. So before I let you go, I like to ask for feedback because I am trying to self-develop and grow and to be better. I know that
Yeah.
you found me. You mentioned you listened to a couple episodes, and then you attended my meetup. Now you've guest spoken at my meetup, and now you've been a guest on my podcast. So I'm curious, if you have any feedback from me, whether positive or constructive, just like what you think about what's going on. Any kind of feedback.
Yeah. That's a great question. I would ask your guests, and maybe you were planning on doing this, but I would ask your guests to share the episode after it's produced and launched with their audience, because that way you're able to leverage their audience and their clout to build yours. So, like, that I got a couple thousand followers on Twitter. I would say, hey, Dick, here's the link. Make it as easy as possible, and say like, here's the link to the podcast episode you're on. If you want your audience, if you thought you provided value in it, you could phrase it super clever. Like, if you think you provided value, uh, you know, in my episode, I'd love for you to share it with your Twitter audience. You know what I mean? And then, well, yeah, I think I had value in it. Okay. You got to, have tact, obviously. But it's something that we do is we ask our guests to post the episodes. And that way, if they've got, a million followers on Twitter or Instagram, maybe we'll get 100 subscribers from it, or new listeners who discover our content. So, yeah.
Hey, I appreciate that. I'll be following up with you with a strategic comment.
There you go. It's got to be, the bar's going to be high. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Dick, for coming on here. For first of all, speaking at the meetup, that was awesome. We had a large turnout today. Close to 50
Yeah.
people showed up because we partnered with the local podcast meetup
Yeah.
as
It's
well.
always a good sign when you see the little in Zoom, when you see the arrow, because there's not enough people that fit on one screen. There's multiple screens of people's cameras. So when I
Yeah.
saw that the second I got on, I went, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So, yeah, if you're listening today and you got value from this content, and you want maybe to learn more, maybe get more engaged with the community, you can go to my website, yinfluence.com/community, or it's just community at the top. And you can come to our weekly meetup that's every Thursday and, hear some of the back end, behind the scenes knowledge from people like Dick, and learn and network with the people in the community. We do breakout sessions and you can network with other creators. I know Marshall who's been watching us here. He was there as well. He said rubber duckies are cool.
Look up the TED Talk about rubber duckies, Marshall. You'll get a good kick out of it.
Yeah, so I definitely encourage you to engage with the community. Otherwise, just I thank you for listening and watching today. And again, today is sponsored by TubeBuddy. TubeBuddy is a plugin for your internet browser to help you optimize on YouTube. So we're able to give away a 3-month paid plan at the meetups to random person. So that's some cool perks that we get with TubeBuddy, and a 30-day free trial, which is in the link in the description. If you create YouTube content, you should definitely check it out. But yeah, thanks so much, Dick. I really appreciate you sharing today.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. This was a ton of fun, and I look forward to checking the episode out and distributing it to my audience, and hopefully cross-pollinating on that front, and just to strengthen your endorsement. So maybe they'll renew a sponsorship with you. I'll also endorse TubeBuddy. That's a huge tool that we use at our company, not just for my content, but for a lot of our clients' content. And they're awesome. A shout out to Phil, who's one of the shareholders there. He and I are buddies. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, actually,
Awesome.
next week we got Rob, who is at TubeBuddy. He's gonna be speaking at our
Awesome.
meetup, and he's gonna be a guest on the podcast. So we're doing a similar thing today with Rob next week.
Awesome. Yeah. Kind of a fun thing with them is they've got a really solid Discord community, which from a marketing perspective is something that's gaining a lot of momentum. So something to maybe ask them about. So
Yeah, sounds great. All right.